very interested in the lessons that we're drawing from Ukraine. I've never seen anything transform our thinking quite so rapidly as that war, and as terrible as it is, it's certainly given us a chance to rethink our own force structure and what we ought to do. So let me start with you, if I may, Mr. Secretary. If you had to, pick the three things that have struck you the most or you think we ought to be aware of as we think about refashioning the force, looking at Ukraine, what would those things, and to be fair, I'm going to ask General George the same question. I'm not trying to pitch you against one another. I'm just very, very curious about how what you're seeing, because we've traveled extensively. I've seen Ukrainian Patriot batteries training at Fort Sill in my district. I've been to Europe and watched Ukrainian soldiers training on NATO facilities and interacting with NATO soldiers, certainly with our soldiers in particular. And I'm just, enormously impressed by how much we're learning. But I'm curious how you would see it and how you would integrate those lessons into what you're doing now.
Absolutely, Chairman. So I think one of the first things is it's impossible to move. So the moment you're near the front lines, there are so many sensors that exist. The Army has for a very long time said, we own the night. And so we have a lot of our offensive capabilities were built around the fact that we own the night. That no longer is sufficient with drones and all of the other sensors. The moment a human or a thing starts to move, the enemy knows. The next one is technology leads. So when General George and I are talking about these platforms of the future, oftentimes we're referencing that they are software systems that are just manifesting in the world as hardware. What they will need to be able to do is be updated in near real time. So what we're learning from drones in Ukraine is they are updating the software and some of the hardware components on these drones every 2 weeks. Our best guess is that today, with our current systems, we might be able to pull it off in 18 months at scale. That is just not even, it is so far from sufficient for the modern warfare. And then the last one is just the speed of war. So the ability to have swarms of things, whether they're autonomous or human-led, is just making it so that the command and control layer that we're about to describe throughout this hearing and the digital layer that is going to be required to basically allow our people to sync with our things and sync with our sensors, that layer needs to be fast, it needs to be protected, and then probably in the future what it needs is it needs to be able to have some sort of generative AI models that can come in and help with things like targeting and all of these different things that human beings have done for a long time, but the speed has changed so quickly that humans are just not able to keep up, and it requires software solutions.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to expand on a couple of things that the Secretary said. I think overall we're paying attention to this all the time. We get a lot of briefings back on this, talking to the Ukrainians. We're learning across every warfighting function. And if the one thing that I hear from our troops is that we're not moving fast enough. I mean, that's the feedback that I get, and why we are, trying to move this forward, and why we're talking about Army Transformation Initiative. I think the big thing is, well, the first one that the Secretary talked about, you cannot hide on the modern battlefield. We have to develop, systems that are lower signature. You're going to have to be more mobile. Everything is going to have to reduce their signature, and that's both visible and on the electromagnetic. We have to work that out. Second is on drones. Drones are going to be in every formation that we do. We're going to have autonomous systems in every formation. Whether it's to protect, detect, or attack, those things are going to be in every kind of formation. A logistics formation, an artillery battery that I know you're familiar with, everybody's going to have to do that. And that gets to training our formations up and down on how we're doing that. And that's what I mentioned, how we're going to have to change how we're organized, because we're going to have to be organized differently. And that's part of Army Transformation Initiative as well. And then I'll probably add one thing, just because the question came from you, Chairman, is just the efficacy of long-range fires, and I think we've seen that. I mean, Ukraine did not have, and this is using drones and long-range fires, did not have a Navy and what they were able to do with the Black Sea Fleet. So that's another area that we are working on very hard. We have to move very quickly in that area as well. And I think it was brought up about having magazine depth. That's the other thing that we are looking at and making sure that we can move quickly in that area.
Well, you anticipated one of my questions, which I was going to ask you specifically about long-range fires and what lessons you've drawn there, because I'm struck, just as Chairman Calvert was, about the transformation of the nature of this war in progress from what we saw at the beginning to this drone, the percentage of casualties now inflicted by drones on both sides. And honestly, I've been, and I'd love to be told you're wrong or whatever, so don't hesitate. But to me, just watching it as a non-professional and outsider, I've been shocked about how little conventional air power has played in this conflict. You know, we've been able to fight without looking up for most of my lifetime. You got to look up on battlefields now because it's not a jet roaring over your head that we can take care of. It's a small drone that's, you know, not that's low enough that we're not knocking it out with air power. So, and I've been shocked about, frankly, how little the advantage Russia would have in the conventional fight in the air has mattered on the ground in this particular conflict, partly because of drones, partly because there's so much more reach and long-range fires now than there used to be. But they're certainly not flying much over the skies in Ukraine. And obviously our Patriot people are part of that, but it's just, it's stunning because it's a lot different than most recent conflicts. So I just, if you would, just quickly, General George, if you have any reflections on any of that, and yeah, I'd just love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, Chairman, I appreciate getting a chance to come back. I mean, I would, follow up. The list would be longer. It's hard to, to go down, stop at 3. You mentioned integrated air and missile defense. So the same reason that we're being really effective with long-range fires, we're going to have to innovate and move quicker. And again, this gets back to we can't wait to 2030 or any of those things. We have to be moving out in that we are doing that. When we talk about integrated air and missile defense, we should also be thoughtful of counter-UAS. We're very focused on sense, decide, and act. So act can be kinetic or non-kinetic, but we have to innovate in each of those areas. So our sensors are going to have to be ubiquitous. We're going to have to look for cheaper sensors that are with every formation because everybody is going to have to be alerted to that. And I don't care what, and I've talked to the other service chiefs, what service you're in, drones are going to be, out there and long-range fires are going to be able to reach. And so we have to focus on that. So that's what we're attempting to do and do that as rapidly as possible. What's a challenge, obviously, and a lot of the drones are dual use, and it's coming, we're seeing drones that can lift, big, heavy. We're going to use them in logistics. That is ahead, and what we need to do is make sure we're doing the same thing, that we have the same agility when it comes to counter-UAS, so that we are maintaining pace with that threat that's going to be out there.
Thank you very much. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Secretary, do you have a further comment?
Oh, I was just going to add, I think one of the things we spend a lot of time thinking about is if it is true that Russia has manufactured nearly 1 million drones, we are an incredibly wealthy nation, perhaps the wealthiest in human history, but even we cannot fire $4 million kinetic weaponry at $800 drones for very long. And so one of the things, back to the speed of sharing information that we need as a nation, is we need to be able to take down some drones with 50 cal rounds, because a 50 cal is pretty cheap. We need to be able to use directed energy at scale. That we are trying to make it so that we can envision a war, because many of the greater wars last a very long time, and we're going to need to be able to afford that war. And so in most of our decisions, what we are talking about as an Army is how do we prepare to engage with a near peer or a peer for a very long time and make the math work.
Thank you. Mr. Morelli.